This episode is about Star Wars. We talk a little about how it relates to our healthcare system and burnout, but mostly it's just two dudes talking about Star Wars. Hey, this is Brad Block, host of The Physician's Guide to Doctoring. This is a personal and professional development podcast for physicians where we have experts on the show that try to teach us everything we should have been learning while we were memorizing Krebs cycle. Welcome back to the podcast. We have a pretty different episode today, but considering how popular my episode was a while ago that I did with Jimmy Turner about smoking meat that had nothing to do with medicine, we're going to give that a try again. And today we're going to talk about Star Wars, okay? So we have Joseph S. Thomas. He is a hospitalist at Buffalo Medical Group. And as some of you may know, I'm a graduate of UB Medical School, and he's a clinical instructor for the Buffalo Catholic Health System internal medicine residency and I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Juville Physician Assistant Program in Buffalo, New York. He also writes the blog Managing Health Expectations, which is how I found him. Definitely check it out. And he serves as the digital media editor for the Journal of Hospital Medicine and uses social media for education and advocacy and Star Wars.
And Star Wars.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, not only to talk on a podcast, but to talk about Star Wars.
What's better than that? I feel like this is what podcasting is really for. Two guys that lock themselves away from their families, two adults to talk about Star Wars.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of healthcare-ish type stuff, to check that box to begin with. So there was recently, for those who hopefully know, because you're listening to this episode, Disney Plus put out this series called The Acolyte. And one of the things that happened in The Acolyte is you see that the Jedi Order is not as perfect as they present themselves in the original, in like the Skywalker saga, which is the prequels, the original trilogy, and the prequels. So the last three. They're a religious order that's tied themselves to the governing body, and then they use that power to regulate who gets to use the Force and who doesn't. So they're ultimately the arbiters. They're a religious body that are the arbiters of this really powerful thing, right? And they basically find if they find other Force users out there, they stop them from using it. My question for you, Dr. Thomas, is what would you say is the equivalent in medicine? And my thoughts could have been the Flexner report, right? That decided who and who couldn't teach people to be doctors. It could be the ACGME, who decides who can practice which specialty and even become an accredited specialty, or the AMA, who really controls supposedly advocacy, but really billing. So what are your thoughts on this?
First of all, I like that we're just diving straight into this. We'll try not to get each other in too much trouble right away. If you've seen my social media, I don't talk about this too often, but I have my qualms with the AMA, and I think the answers that you mentioned there all kind of tie in together, really. The American Medical Association has done a lot of great things, and there are some good things in its history. I know people that are involved in some of the upper ranks and some of the medical student sections and such, and those discussions that they have can be very productive and have led to great public health things. The no smoking on airplanes came out of the AMA student section once upon a time. So there's great things to be done there. However, I think these days we find that the AMA doesn't always represent physician voices in the arenas where they should be represented. I think sometimes recently, I guess the most recent thing that I saw was because the FTC is coming down on non-competes, which have been the bane of doctors' existence for one of the banes of doctors' existence for a while now. And hospital associations and their larger organizations are trying to fight that back and preserve their ability to use non-competes. And I saw an article about this, and one of the first comments from a physician was, "Where's the AMA?" And maybe they are doing some stuff, and to be honest, I'm not privy to those conversations.
Just because we're not aware of it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Absolutely. But at the same time, what I see most from the AMA is missing the forest for one particular tree, and that one particular tree is nurse practitioners and physician associates. And however you feel about that, that's a topic for a whole other podcast episode. But group focuses so much on, and with the slogan "Stop Scope Creep," which I've always hated. And it comes from the other side too. The larger organizations representing physician associates and nurse practitioners, they also kind of come at this with a, fighting for independent practice. And we are talking about stopping scope creep. And if you talk to the boots on the ground, neither side really wants that. I don't necessarily support independent practice for NPs and PAs, but I understand where that comes from when you have doctors that don't treat NPs and PAs like the colleagues that they should be. And I think that there could be a lot more to be done for collaborative efforts and focusing on the team dynamic. But that's not what sells, and that's not what, drives recruitment materials.
Right. Just like in politics, right? It's the division that sells. There's so much more, like as much as there might be vitriol spouted on both sides. Like we have more in common than we do that makes us different. If we could just find a way to work together, but you don't get elected by working together. You get elected by saying how terrible the other side is, so it gets your side to vote, and then you stay in power. Unfortunately, it's a product of, in some degree, the system itself. Actually, one of my first episodes was about effective advocacy, and maybe we should just do another episode on that, on effective advocacy. And the lawyer who I had on said that the two main things that we talk about are scope of practice and reimbursement. Those are the two main issues for advocacy. And as a sidebar, she said the best thing to do would be to be an active member of your specialty, whatever your specialty happens to be. For me, it's otolaryngology. For you, it's internal medicine or maybe hospitalist medicine, because they're the ones who are going to really understand your specific issues and your specific interests. Whereas the AMA, it's hard for them to know what every doctor and speak for every doctor, because we're just not a monolith like that. But you're right. Do they really speak for us? And it seems like to some degree, they're just there to keep their own piece of the pie and stay in existence. Kind of like an elected official. You think an elected official's job is to govern. No, it's to get reelected. And so, right. It becomes like it's a problem for what they need to do in order to survive. They do in order to survive. Yeah,
exactly. What you said about just, trying to stay elected and stay in power, if you've ever watched The West Wing, that's, you get to govern for 18 months, right?
More than once. I love that show. Yeah.
Exactly. Same. You govern for 18 months, and then before and after that, it's all campaigning for re-election. And similar with our own organizations. I do like the Society of Hospital Medicine. I'm obviously actively involved with the journal and everything. And their advocacy wings is great. I should pull back and I should acknowledge that, as you said, the AMA is hard, has a difficult task ahead of it to, try to represent all physicians. I will say, if they ever put the efforts that they take to get their recruitment materials to physicians' mailboxes and everything, and if they put that towards like general voting or whatever, we would have this election, like the entire election process or a tax process, whatever you wanted to do, would be completely simplified because they will find you wherever you are.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm still not getting your disability insurance. AMA, thank you. It's now the next month, but I expect your letter in a month from now as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so it was supposed to be lighthearted and Star Warsy. So let's go back to that. Okay, so if you have someone, whether it's a child or like a significant other, that's never seen Star Wars before, what is the order of introduction? What order do you watch them?
This is a great question. It has been hotly debated at times. For me, it was my wife. Ashley had never seen Star Wars prior to marrying me, and she was reluctant to get into it. But when the newer shows started coming out, like The Mandalorian and everything, I realized that aspects of those shows were what she would like. But you can't appreciate those shows unless you have the background.
You need context.
Exactly. So for me, we started with the original trilogy, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, because that's how I got into it. That's how I fell in love with these characters and this universe. And so that's where I started with her. Then we went back to the prequels. Ideally, you'd go Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and then you watch The Clone Wars. And
that's a lot of work right there.
That's a lot of work because it's 7 seasons.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there are watch guides where they will just pick out the most important episodes for you. And so that's kind of what we did. I knew she wouldn't last the whole 7 seasons, but we made it through.
She really loves
That is exactly what it is. It's about 8.5 years. And if she got through Star Wars, she could make it through anything. So you get to because Attack of the Clones does so much to enhance what is not great about the prequels. And it does so much to support that. So if you have the time and the ability to commit, I do highly recommend the Clone Wars. And then you get into...
Sorry, so you're saying it kind of shores up the weaknesses of the prequels.
Exactly. The wooden acting and difficult to believe love story of Attack of the Clones gets fleshed out so much better, and those characters get fleshed out so much better in the Clone Wars, and that's why I like it. The Clone Wars also introduces my very favorite character in Star Wars, which is Ahsoka Tano. And we can talk about favorite characters, but to finish the thought, then you get into Revenge of the Sith, and then you go into the sequel trilogy or the prequel trilogy, as you said, and The Force Awakens is a nice rehash, kind of sets stuff up. The Last Jedi took me some time. It took me a couple of watches to really enjoy. I've kind of come around on that. Where in some of the newer TV shows, the fact that they are run by people who aren't as familiar with Star Wars actually is a good thing because they bring, a different perspective while staying true to the material. I think that The Rise of Skywalker is what happens when a director comes in and just throws fan service.
So for me, I think you needed someone like Kevin Feige, who runs Marvel.
Yes.
So he's the one that decides what movie's next, what the overarching themes are. Now, each director can, they've got some license within whatever movie that they're making, but he's got his eye on the overall story, right?
Exactly.
And I don't think they had that in Star Wars because Rian Johnson, who directed the second film, The Last Jedi, was able to kind of like do his own take on it, which then ended up kind of contradicting other parts of the story. But it wasn't as consistent. I liked it because of the democratization of the Force. Like that was the first time where you saw that like you could have someone who is like some poor kid in the outer reaches who's Force sensitive and kind of figures out himself how to use the Force. That wasn't really introduced before that. And so I realized that you didn't have to be Skywalker royalty in order to use the Force. It democratized it. And I thought that was an awesome idea. That was like my favorite part of that whole, like you could be like Rey was nobody. Like you could be nobody and still be a Force user and still be important. You didn't have to be important by birth. So
100%.
That's what I really loved about it. But there's a bit of an aside. So that's the order.
I think so. And you're absolutely right. That unifying vision really served the Marvel movies. And I think we really could have used that with the Star Wars movies, especially the sequel trilogy. I think the TV shows had that or have that in Dave Filoni. And there's that connectivity that he sort of masterminded. And I know he's not alone in that, but he's kind of the big face there. But the movies never really had that. And that does make that kind of difficult.
So
but I really like what you said.
And we'll talk about Dave Filoni, and not him specifically, but like his vision for these, because I find these new shows so exciting and invigorating for the series, especially the disappointment of the prequels and the sequels. So the order, just a little aside from my wife, whose middle name is Ashley. She grew up in Switzerland. She was not her dad's an opera singer. Like these are not Star Wars people. She'd never seen Star Wars before, but she watched How I Met Your Mother. She loved that show. And there was an episode where Ted said to, I can't remember what his friend's name was, but he was like, so I'm dating this girl and it's going really well. And she said, she's never seen Star Wars before. And he was like, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And then they watched it and they were like, oh no, this is a big deal. You have to see how she reacts to it. It's totally important. By the way, do you want to watch it again? Yes, let's watch it again. And so after seeing that scene, my wife realized I wasn't a lunatic. Mm-hmm. And that there were other people out there like me and that she needed to watch Star Wars. So it was and I had made the point before because I was like, if you live in America and you watch TV, there are going to be Star Wars pop culture references constantly. They're all over the place. And if you don't, you have to see them in order to get the joke.
Yes.
And then in a very meta way, like she ended up watching a show and understood the pop culture reference. It was a reflection of our own life. So she ended up watching Star Wars with me. And now the kids, I have 3 boys and they like Star Wars. And, it's fun. My son built the Millennium Falcon on a Lego
Nice.
Falcon. It's Falcon.
Falcon.
Yeah. So, I mean, my order for the boys was they just watched the original series. That was it. I've actually never seen the Clone Wars. I've never
You know what? It's a commitment. It's 7 seasons. What happened for me was in peak pandemic, 2020, Ashley went to do her fellowship. It was a 1-year fellowship. She's a neurologist. She did a 1-year fellowship in headache medicine, 2020 to 2021. So I was at home by myself here in Buffalo, and I would go down and visit when I could, but it was 2020. She was staying with her parents, and I didn't want to bring COVID to them because I was working with COVID patients every day. So I had a lot of time to myself, and that was fun for like a week. And then I got really bored. So I did a full stem to stern rewatch of all of Star Wars that was out so far, except for one. I didn't get through the holiday special, but I watched I watched all the rest of Star Wars, and I was like, well, I got nothing else to do. Let me dive into the Clone Wars. And so I just went through all 7 seasons. So I had the time to do that. I didn't have kids or anything like that. So it's difficult to commit to that much.
Yeah.
But I do think it helps.
The holiday special. So you still haven't seen it?
I've seen parts of it, and it is something to say.
My brother managed to get a bootleg VHS at some point. That's how long ago he managed to find it. And so we watched it, and it is awful and hilarious. I tried to get my kids to watch it on Christmas, and it was and these are kids that get like absorbed into the television. You put anything on there, they could not sit through it for very long. The only redeeming thing is there's some cartoon aspect.
The one that introduces Boba Fett, right?
That introduces Boba Fett. Yeah. So that was pretty cool seeing that. It's like 70s style cartoon. Nice. But yeah, it's about like the Chewbacca's Wookiee family, and they've got to get him home for Life Day. Well, I mean, I think you can find it on YouTube somewhere.
That's how I watched the first part of it. And it was one of those things where I was like, this would be better if I was watching it with somebody. And then I never went back to it.
Yeah. It's funny in like a sad kind of way.
Right.
But clearly they managed to turn things around. For all of you out there, if you're having trouble with your writing, your social media posting, with anything, right? Like they made a bad Star Wars holiday special. And then they came back from it. They can come back from that awful mess to do what they're doing now. You can too.
Amen.
Let's talk about the new series that are coming out on Disney Plus, right?
Yes.
There's a theme here that they're exploring that I love. And I'm sure you're seeing the same thing. What is it that you're seeing?
Going back to kind of what you talked about with the democratization of the Force, they found that you can get away from the Skywalker saga and actually make really great Star Wars. And the best part about it is, because in the original, there's the light side and there's the dark side. And exploring that in between and finding out that there is an in between, first of all, and then exploring that. And as my friend and colleague and mentor, Mark Shapiro, says, exploring the space. I shouldn't mention another podcast on this one.
It's fine. If you're interested, he's taken a little bit of a pause from it, but he's got a ton of great episodes. He's a super talented podcaster. He's been out there for a while. Yeah, no, Mark is, he's a great podcaster.
But exploring that in between of what happened, when one side is not perfect and one side is things that they may offer, and finding that. And nowhere is that more apparent than in The Acolyte. But in all of these shows, I think I've been enjoying that aspect of it. And that's what I like about Ahsoka Tano, and it's what I like about a lot of these things. I don't know if that's the theme that you were seeing, but that's what my favorite part has been.
Total. It's not that life is not good and evil, black and white. It's all the shades of gray in between. And one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. Like ultimately it's just ends up being whichever side ends up writing the history that which title you end up getting. But it's that gray zone. And I think Bill Burr was on, I think it was The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Right, where he played an Imperial soldier or Imperial officer who ended up defecting. He basically said, for a lot of these people, it doesn't matter whether you're a rebel, you're an empire, you're on their planet, you're invading their space. You're a problem no matter which side you're on. Like you just got to pick which works for you at that moment. And then there was another scene where they were on Coruscant, which is like the capital planet of the galaxy, and one of the elite, this like almost a throwaway line. says to another in a character you never even learn who they are as they're walking by, like, oh wait, who's in power now? Like, it doesn't really make a difference to me. Like whether it's the rebels or the empire, like to the elite, the rich, the wealthy elite, it doesn't matter. They're fine no matter who's in power. It doesn't actually make a difference. So like how consequential all of this stuff they make it seem. And then to the lives of the common people, how much difference does it make? To the lives, how much difference does it make? Like, planets are blowing up and all these things and terrible things happen. But then in other corners of the universe, how much are things really changing? Who's right and who's wrong and who's good and who's bad? And excited, my oldest is 8. So it's not like I'm watching The Mandalorian with them now. But one day I will. And I love that I'm going to be able to talk to them about this stuff and help them understand it's not good and evil, black and white. Everything is somewhere in between.
Exactly. I think first, when that line from Bill Burr came, I think I may have shouted at the TV because it was such a good sentiment. Also, I'm pretty sure that was just Bill Burr being Bill Burr, just playing himself in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, somehow there was an Imperial officer with a Boston accent. I'm not sure.
Yeah, somehow that happens. If Palpatine can return, that guy can have a Boston accent. Spoilers for the sequel trilogy. But I agree. I think that seeing how it affects or doesn't affect all the people besides the main characters, and I think they do a nice job of exploring the consequences on regular people in the movies, partially for time and partially for pacing reasons. We're not always able to see the regular folks and how they're affected by everything that goes on with the Star Wars. And then in shows like Mandalorian, Andor, and Ahsoka, we see real people get affected by it. Even as we're, kind of focused on our favorite characters and our heroes and villains, there are people caught in that crossfire and people that have, or people that get drawn into the conflict sort of unwillingly and then are forced to take a stand and do something. And how that affects them it becomes much more real that way, which has been really cool.
I think it's Stellan Skarsgård, having trouble saying his name, who was in Andor, has this like incredible monologue about what he's done. So he's on the side of the rebels, and he is basically saying in this monologue that he sold his soul for the devil. He is for a sunrise that he'll never see.
For the sunrise he'll never see.
What he hates, in order to achieve a sunrise for people he'll never meet. And a sunrise that he'll never see, or something along those lines. And
yeah.
You can
I have to use the tools of my enemy to. Oh, such a great monologue.
So good. I love it so much. That's this gray zone. And then with the Acolyte, right? That we said earlier, that the Jedi are not infallible. They're doing things like to keep themselves in power that might not be the right thing. And if the wrong thing happens, then, they have to cover it up, spoiler alert, in order to maintain that power. They're not infallible.
There's a character, and I forget the actor's name. He's the politician. In the earlier, stuff, especially or in the movies, we're taught to kind of fear or hate the politicians involved. But in the Acolyte, and again, this is taking place 1,000 years or whatever before the prequel trilogy, but this one politician, takes down the Jedi Order in a monologue to the one lead Jedi, and I'm forgetting her name now too, but he basically points that out. You all think you can control the impossible. And the Jedi says, you mean the Force? And he goes, no, your emotions. And what happens when you're all supposed to be these emotionless beings and then someone snaps? And just as a physician, I was like, yeah. And I recently have written about and have focused on things like, and this is a tired term, but burnout and to some extent, the mental health of physicians. I've written a couple of things recently about trying to reconnect with the human in ourselves. And one of those things was that we often, in our work days, we're often forced to kind of tamp down our emotions and regulate that to a point where we don't show that at all. And if we do show that, it's still in some circles viewed as a sign of weakness. And you can't get away with that for very long. And I emphasize this to my residents now, is that you have to let that stuff out, whether it's, to your colleagues or if you put it towards something, like a creative effort or social media posting or something, but you have to release those somehow. and be able to express your emotions and your fatigue and your frustration in some, semi-healthy way, because otherwise it will snap and something will come out where it shouldn't, and sometimes in an unhealthy way.
Amen. So I totally agree. And to add to what you said earlier about, to bring it back to the Force, don't want to take it too far into the healthcare weeds this time, but the difference between the dark side and the light side, right? In the light side, they're suppressing their emotions, as you said, like a good doctor should, right? Suppress your emotions, be stoic. And what do they do on the dark side? Acknowledge their emotions and they embrace their emotions. So who's really wrong in that situation? You've got anger, use that anger. That anger can make you powerful. Now it can also make you blind. So you need to be able to recognize that you're doing it when you're doing it, manage it appropriately, or it could get out of control in the same way that someone who tries to ignore their anger, the anger can then bubble over it and get out of control. So I think it's a really interesting take on like who really is handling the Force correctly. Is it the ones that are ignoring their emotions and trying to control the impossible, their emotions, or the ones that are acknowledging their emotions and embracing them and using them? So does it really make them bad?
Exactly. And I love that they explored that not only through the Jedi and what will be called the Sith, but also this third party, essentially, of Force users, the Night Sisters. If you've ever played any of the video games, which is how I was introduced to it, because there's a whole book series, and I don't know if you ever got a chance to read any of those before Disney took over.
Timothy Zahn. I think I started the books when I was like a teenager. Maybe.
Same.
Never got through them. Yeah.
There was a whole, Timothy Zahn was a big author there, but there was a whole bunch of them marketed for all the different age groups.
Yeah.
Some of it was just capitalizing on the product, but there's a lot of great stories in there. And one of the things I actually like about Disney is that they're finally starting to pull from some of those stories, which is what they did for the Acolyte, from what I understand. They explore some of this in Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. But anyway, the Night Sisters.
Right? You've got all this material to choose from. You don't have to sit there and noodle over new ideas. You can just pull over these old ones. It'll pay service to the fans, and you can use it however you want. Like you can take these characters and then use them however you want. That someone's already done the creative heavy lifting. You just choose how to use it.
Exactly.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's exactly what it is. And that's what I was wondering, and I was waiting for Disney to finally start doing. And now that they are, I'm very happy. So you have these Night Sisters, these witches, who are Force users, but they aren't Jedi and they aren't Sith. They aren't lightsaber wielders. They use it in a completely different way than we're kind of used to. And is that a bad thing? Maybe not. And I think that's what the Acolyte kind of explores and does a fantastic job of it. I thought it was, and I don't know if we want to get into this part, but it was very funny to watch people who claim to be Star Wars fans kind of melt down over that aspect of it, because it wasn't the Skywalkers, it wasn't the Jedi. An acquaintance of mine who was a big fan of the show Obi-Wan Kenobi, and like some of these other ones, thought this was the worst Star Wars because it was, quote, woke, and because it focused on women and women of color. And it wasn't just about this Jedi versus Sith conflict. And whatever his criticisms were, there are things to criticize, sure. It wasn't a perfect series by any means. And I say that knowing full well that I can't make television.
But some of the acting could have been a little better. Like the acting in Andor, I thought was unreal, but you can't get, I can't remember his name, the guy that plays Gollum, to be in all of your shows. Right?
Andy Serkis.
He is just unreal. And you can't, but I actually liked the Acolyte better than Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan, you've got to take the story and you've got to fit it in a story that's already been written within the confines of all of the backstories that are already out there. You got to kind of shoehorn a story in there, and there are going to be some contradictions to the timeline. So if you're going to do it, you got to do it now, because while everyone's the appropriate age to be playing these characters, but there was some stuff that didn't make sense, and it really wasn't that compelling a story. And but this stuff, because you get to start fresh, you can really make a really compelling story. And yes, it's going to alienate some people that for just these awful reasons. And you know what? They've got some work to do, and they're probably not going to do it. But I don't think we need to I don't think we need to give them any more of our time or airtime or headspace because they don't deserve it.
Amen.
It's already been, over a half an hour. So we're going to have to, close the episode. But before we go, favorite Star Wars quote and why?
There's a couple of great ones. When I'm on the wards and somebody uses IV hydralazine, I always say, so uncivilized. I think the one I use the most in my day-to-day life is probably, I've got a bad feeling about this. And that's just, sometimes the nature of my work. And I probably don't say it that seriously when I do say it, but it's just one of those things that comes out of my mouth every now and then. Yeah. Favorite Star Wars quote, I think, not necessarily of my own life, but I think that Stellan Skarsgård speech is really, it's one of the best monologues that I've heard in any TV show that I've watched recently. I don't watch a whole lot of TV, but in any TV show that I've seen, and especially in any Star Wars, there's just something about that vibe of the bitter warrior, who knows he's nearing the end. And I love that. I can always talk about I have frustrations with do or do not. There is no try for a wide variety of reasons that would take another half hour to talk about. But, at the end of the day, may the force be with you.
Indeed. Well, I think it's try or try not, do or do. I can't believe I can't even remember it. But I've actually wrestled with that one for a while because it's like, wait, what's wrong with trying?
Exactly.
Like, is this, you don't want to tell your kids it's not okay to try. But I think what it comes down to is if you're going to do it with the intention of success, that's how you're going to approach everything. Like when you're training to be a doctor, when you're taking someone to the operating room, when you're doing the approval, whether doing a procedure, you're doing it to do it. You're not doing it to try it. You're doing it to do it with the intention of success. And actually, there was a while ago, I did an interview on mindsets for behavioral change, right? So you're trying to teach your patients how to be, how to lose weight, how to exercise more, eat better, watch less TV, whatever. The mindset, she referred to it as, her name was Dr. Kyra Bobinet. She referred to it as an iterative mindset, where you have to iterate. And those who iterate ultimately succeed because they'll keep trying things until they ultimately succeed, which, a little contradicts the try or try not. But basically, like if they've got a goal, they're going to keep trying different stuff until they achieve that goal, which means that they're just going to do it. They don't know how they're going to do it at the beginning, but they're going to know that they're going to do it. Over the years, how I've thought about that quote has kind of evolved. And I think that's how you have to approach it. Like, no, Luke, you can't try. Like, you've got to know that you're going to do it. You've got to know it. And once you know it, then you can do it.
I think that's the best explanation I've heard of that quote in a long time. I agree. I think that's what they meant by it. I think one of the frustrations I have with Jedi Order is that they often do speak in platitudes and then don't, we never see them elaborate on it. Whereas in real life, you do have to kind of explore that sort of nuance with that. And I think you did a great job just there.
Thank you. Well, if people want to learn more about you, they want to see your online footprint, where can they find you?
I am at Doc with Bowtie, DOC with Bowtie, BOWTIE, on all the social media platforms. So Twitter or X, whatever you call it, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and I write the blog Managing Health Expectations. And yes, that's where you can find me. And then I put out content for the Journal of Hospital Medicine as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time, sharing your love of Star Wars with me and the listeners, and all you do for your patients and your trainees.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thanks for listening. So please share it or like it or comment on a social media post or write us a 5-star review. Thank us again for listening to The Physician's Guide to Doctoring.